Picture two men sitting in a comfortable office somewhere, sipping energy drinks, scrolling through task lists, and occasionally stepping outside for a smoke break. They might sound like they could be coders pulling a late shift anywhere in the world. But this is Ukraine, and they're drone pilots, and they're killing Russian soldiers on the other side of a computer screen from the comfort of a desk miles away. Ukraine has changed the game entirely, and in more ways than one. It's turned the war into something that looks a lot like a video game. And the best part is that it's winning because of it. That image alone should tell you something profound about how much this war has changed. When Russia launched the invasion back in 2022, the opening strategies looked familiar, with columns of tanks advancing with the support of mass artillery strikes and overwhelming numbers. After all, Russia had roughly 190,000 troops massed near Ukraine's borders out of an active force of nearly 900,000. Ukraine had around 160,000 active soldiers to hold the line. So you can't fault Russia for expecting a quick, decisive, conventionally superior victory. But a funny thing happened on the way to that expected blitzkrieg: drones. 3 years later, the war has mutated into a grinding, tech-saturated drone slugfest, where the best operator in the room can do more damage in one shift than an entire armoured column could accomplish in a week. Make no mistake, Russia still has the numbers, it still has the artillery. Its active forces have actually grown to somewhere between 1.2 and 1.5 million since the invasion started, with roughly 600,000 deployed to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine has scraped together around 880,000 soldiers through aggressive mobilization laws that allow conscription of anyone between 25 and 60. The math still favors Russia, at least on paper. At the center of this shift are two technologies: the aforementioned drones and the satellite internet service Starlink. The latter directly helps the former eliminate the drawbacks of drone operations almost entirely. You see, traditional drone teams needed to stay within roughly 15 to 20 miles of their targets. To maintain that proximity, they'd set up in improvised bunkers close to the front and use camouflage to avoid Russian artillery and drone strikes. It was dangerous, exposed work, made even more dangerous by the fact that they also needed to run offensive missions, surveillance, reconnaissance, and provide battlefield support for other drones. And as Russia upgraded its own drone capabilities, such as deploying fiber-optic FPV drones that bypass signal jammers, those frontline positions became increasingly lethal to occupy. But the Nemesis unit, formerly known as the 412th Separate Unmanned Systems Regiment, was among the very first to ask a simple but revolutionary question: what if the pilots didn't have to be anywhere near the front at all? That answer goes back to Starlink. By integrating a satellite terminal directly into the drone, physically strapping the dish to the top of the aircraft, drones could connect to the internet and be controlled from literally anywhere on Earth with a stable connection. As one of the actual Nemesis drones developers put it, when there was a big idea to put Starlink, the radio horizon issue disappeared. The distance between the operator and the drone generally ceased to have any meaning. By increasing the effective range, the integration with Starlink changed the entire operational model and risk-reward calculation for Ukraine. A ground crew still needs to be relatively close to the front, close enough to launch and maintain the drone or reload munitions, but the pilots themselves can be on the other side of the country. You can have an operator who sits in Kyiv in a warm office at a desk with a smoothie and drops 3 to 4 shells in one mission. An actual soldier with proper training can then be called upon to just rearm the device and ensure the defensive position is still protected and invisible. And the range claim was documented firsthand by reporters from the Kyiv Independent, who spent an entire night shift with 2 Nemesis operators in a secure office somewhere in Ukraine, watching them run live combat missions from a pair of Dell monitors. Oleg was a videographer before the war. Anton was an engineer at a concrete plant. Both volunteered in early 2022 and eventually ended up running sorties deep inside Russian-held territory, all from a desk chair behind a large buffer zone with no artillery whistling overhead. Now, before getting into what Nemesis has accomplished, it's worth taking a minute to understand how these machines actually operate now, because there's a big gap between drone drops a bomb on a tank and the actual chain of technology that makes that possible. The Nemesis drone and its newer cousins like the Vampire and the Kazan are oversized quadcopters or hexacopters with 4 to 8 rotors spinning in unison to lift a significant payload. The Nemesis itself is well over 3 feet wide between its 4 motors. Compared to the retrofitted commercial video drones that were used at the start of the war to kamikaze into the enemy, the Nemesis is an actual purpose-built strike platform with the specs to match. The aircraft carries around 25 pounds of explosives on an external suspension system mounted beneath the frame. The release mechanism is elegantly simple, made out of a strap with a locking ring that holds each munition in place. When the operator triggers the release, the lock disengages, the ring drops free, and the munition falls. The actual content and division of the munitions can be separated into 2 larger explosives for hardened targets or up to 8 smaller drops for light vehicles and personnel. Some configurations also carry anti-tank mines, allowing the drone to remotely seed a road or vehicle path with explosives and return to base. If push comes to shove, those anti-tank mines are still excellent para-drop explosives, since they can obliterate an older tank, like we've increasingly seen Russia use over the past few years. The drone speed is also surprising, with top speeds between 40 and 50 miles per hour, depending on the weight load of the payload. As you might guess, heavier loads mean decreased speed, range and maneuverability, meaning that operations management needs to balance between being lethal and being fast. The drone navigation itself is handled through a combination of GPS and satellite link systems, with the aforementioned Starlink integration providing the communications backbone. They use a high bandwidth COFDM radio link connected to either a mobile Starlink ground station or another drone, a mother drone so to speak, flying at high altitude nearby. But the most important tool in the operator's kit is the thermal camera. Most missions run at night, specifically because thermal imaging is more effective in darkness, where heat signatures pop against a cold background. The operator is basically watching the battlefield in black and white thermal imagery, where a warm engine, or a person, reads as a bright white shape and a cold field reads as grey. Then, identifying an armoured vehicle, a command post, or a group of soldiers hiding under cover requires trained eyes that can interpret what they're seeing and act on it quickly. This is why operator training is so intensive. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense has been explicit about what it takes to run one of these platforms. Trainees run intensive exercises with thermal and night vision optics, training to identify camouflage targets and concealed positions under realistic battlefield conditions. And the ground crew needs to undergo explosives handling training from day one, because they're constantly attaching live munitions to small and live aircraft that have to be handled safely right up until the moment they leave the ground. While soldiers are a natural fit for the ground crew, Ukraine has managed to dip into a surprising talent pool for the operator's side: gamers. With hand-eye coordination necessary for quick movements, someone who has experience playing first-person shooter games can more easily become a natural fit behind the wheel of a drone. It's also no surprise that the haptic feedback required to pilot the drone translated to both Ukraine and Russia, resulting to console controllers as the go-to platform for drone handling. When the mission goes right, it looks something like this. The drone climbs to altitude, the thermal feed activates, a navigator identifies the target coordinates from the intel package. The operator maneuvers the drone into position above it and calculates the drop ballistics, accounting for altitude, speed and wind. Then, the actual attack is simply releasing one of the munitions triggers at the precise moment. The explosive falls, the drone sails away, and that drone, or even a separate one, confirms the hit on the feed before moving to reset for the next mission. The entire process from launch to confirmed strike can happen in under an hour. And when you have pilots running entire nights from a secure office hundreds of miles away, it can happen multiple times per shift, across multiple ground crew rotations, without a single operator setting foot anywhere near the front. That's the new rhythm of this war. Not trench runs, not tank columns, a night shift queue of missions delivered to a screen, executed by a joystick operator, in no danger of being shelled by enemy artillery. The implications of that capability extend well beyond a single impressive mission. Think about what it means for Russia's core strategic advantage. For the past 3 years, one of Moscow's most effective tools has been its willingness to spend human lives. Russia has executed meat wave assaults, where mass infantry charges are designed to overwhelm Ukrainian defensive positions through sheer weight of numbers, accepting enormous casualties to inch forward. This strategy works, in a grim sense, because Russia has the population to sustain it. Ukraine doesn't. Now, if you want to learn more about Russian tactics and why exactly they're failing, make sure to subscribe to the Military Show. We have dozens of videos on that topic, all with gritty statistics and key reasons why Russia's economy and stringent politics are to blame. But returning to Ukraine, if it can field entire fleets of remotely operated drones, they remove one of Russia's primary tools of coercion entirely. You can't bleed a drone unit dry with artillery. You can't threaten pilots who aren't within artillery range. The human cost equation shifts fundamentally. The 412th Nemesis Regiment has already demonstrated this at scale. The unit was formally established in December 2023 and tasked with a specific mission: destroy Russian air defense systems, disrupt logistic routes, and take out artillery. It was deep, high-value target elimination at its core, requiring reaching behind Russian lines and hitting things Russia assumed were safe. By early 2025, the unit had conducted more than 10,000 combat sorties. Those missions resulted in over 1,000 confirmed target destructions and damage to more than 5,500 others. More than 2,000 mines were remotely deployed using the drones alone. In January 2025 alone, the regiment claimed over 100 pieces of equipment destroyed. More broadly, it has reported over 1,000 confirmed target destructions across its first 10,000 sorties, highlighting the scale and consistency of its operations over time. Artillery has been the regiment's primary focus, and the numbers reflect it. Since the beginning of 2024, the 412th Nemesis Regiment has hit 2,500 Russian howitzers and guns. That's a relentless systematic campaign against Russia's primary indirect fire capability and the exact weapon system that's been grinding down Ukrainian defensive positions for 3 years. But the hits that drew the most attention were against Russian air defenses. These are the systems Russia uses to shield its forces from Ukrainian aircraft and missiles. In August 2025 alone, Nemesis destroyed 2 Tor anti-aircraft missile systems, a Buk launcher, and its radar. Estimated Russian losses from that single month of operations, $80 to $90 million. And the regiment kept coming up with novel ways to remove the Russian threat entirely. In early 2025, Nemesis destroyed 60 Russian Shahed and Gerberer attack drones, using experimental $5,000 interceptor drones of their own. It's basically drones hunting drones with no human life at risk in the process. For context, a Shahed cost around $150,000. The economics of that exchange are almost absurd. In under 2 years, the unit grew from a battalion to a full brigade, accounting for roughly 20% of all confirmed strikes on Russian air defense systems in occupied territory, and destroying enemy equipment valued at approximately $3 billion. And then there's another aspect, where it connects to something Ukraine has been quietly building in parallel, a system that makes the entire drone ecosystem operate like a competitive game. Ukraine's Ministry of Digital Transformation launched what it calls the Army of Drones bonus program, which is a points-based incentive system that assigns specific values to confirm battlefield kills. You could get 6 points for an enemy soldier, 20 points for damaging a tank, 40 points for destroying one, up to 50 points for taking out a mobile rocket system, depending on caliber. These numbers are constantly getting tweaked based on what Ukrainian leadership believes is the most pressing threat at any given moment along the 600-mile front line. The incentive is that the points are then used to order new equipment or ammunition refills, or even to support training more drone operators. By scoring points, each drone unit gets a real-time view of what targets are also most common on the field, and how their current tactics match up against what Russia has to prevent them. And the results can be striking. As Mikhailo Fedorov, Ukraine's Minister of Digital Transformation, explained directly, we increased the number of points for infantry elimination from 2 to 6, and that doubled the number of destroyed enemies in 1 month. Just by adjusting a number in a spreadsheet, Ukraine doubled its kill rate against infantry. No new equipment, no new tactics, no new orders, just changing the incentive. The points are directly used in a digital marketplace system Ukraine built called Brave One, essentially described by officials as Amazon for the military. A top-performing squad like Magyar's Birds has reportedly accumulated over 16,000 points, enough to purchase hundreds of FPV drones and dozens of heavier bombers, all selected by the operators themselves based on what works in their specific sector. What makes this relevant to the Starlink-enabled remote warfare model isn't just the points themselves, but what the system reveals and rewards. Because every confirmed kill requires video documentation to qualify for points. Ukraine is simultaneously building the most comprehensive database of drone combat operations ever assembled. And that documentation process naturally surfaces the best operators in the entire force. Skill becomes measurable. Talent becomes visible, and talented pilots, the ones who can fly a thermal-equipped bomber over occupied territory at 2 AM and consistently hit basement doorways on the first or second pass, can be identified, cultivated, and given better equipment. Pair that with the remote operating model, and something powerful emerges. The highest scoring operators don't need to be anywhere near the front. They can work from a secure location, rotate between multiple ground crews stationed in different sectors, respawn into a fresh drone while another aircraft recharges, and run mission after mission without ever entering the kill zone. The point system finds the best pilots. The Starlink integration keeps them alive to keep scoring. But none of this works without the people on the ground. The ground crews are the ones who prep the drones, handle munitions, and manage the launch sites. Their exposure has been reduced significantly by the remote model, but they're still there, and their effectiveness creates the operational pockets that make everything else possible. A skilled remote pilot is only as good as the forward team maintaining the aircraft and holding that piece of ground. The soldiers on the front line aren't made obsolete by drones. They're the anchor points around which remote operations orbit. When ground forces maintain solid defensive positions, they create stable forward launch nodes that remote pilots can plug into on rotation. As those nodes push further forward, or as ground forces hold territory that might otherwise be contested, the reach of remote drone operations expands accordingly. It's a feedback loop between conventional soldiering and remote strike capability. Each one amplifies the other. None of what Ukraine has built is entirely novel in concept. The idea of keeping the people doing the killing safely, distant from the thing being killed, is as old as standoff warfare itself. Bombers have been striking targets from altitude since World War I. Artillery has been doing it since before that. We've had cruise missiles, long-range guided munitions, and carrier-based strike aircraft. The principle is the same. Put ordnance on target without putting your own people at risk of direct retaliation. What's genuinely new here is the scale, the cost, and the speed of iteration. A cruise missile cost over $1 million. A Nemesis drone cost a fraction of that and can fly more than 20 missions before it needs significant maintenance. An F-35 sortie requires infrastructure, trained pilots, supply chains, and years of procurement. A Starlink-equipped heavy bomber can be assembled by a domestic Ukrainian startup, updated with a firmware patch, and operational within weeks of a new design concept being tested. Ukraine is running the first real-world large-scale demonstration of what happens when you push standoff warfare down to the squad level. And it's doing it with commercially derived hardware, improvised integration, and a gamified incentive structure built on an app. The results are being studied by every serious military in the world. Because if a country producing 200,000 drones a month from workshops that barely existed before 2022 can triple its effective strike depth, deny Russian armor safe staging areas within 90 miles of the front, and identify and reward its best operators through a digital marketplace, imagine what a fully resourced NATO force could accomplish. Imagine entire crews stationed hundreds of miles from any front lines, with access to persistent surveillance corridors, provided by satellite imagery and a combination of FPV and long-range drones, and maintained 24 hours a day. They could perform seek and destroy missions the way a dispatcher routes rideshares. But for now, Ukraine is living a rough draft version of this future, with a couple of guys sitting in a nice office somewhere in the countryside, sitting in front of a pair of Dell monitors, picking off Russian soldiers, and going for the high score. The game has changed. Ukraine figured that out early, and if the rest of the world is paying attention, and it is, the way wars get fought is never going back to what it was. But if you want to learn more about how exactly Ukraine managed to do this with no functioning industry, the answer is sheer innovation and pressing need. To learn more about that, check out this video. Or to stay up to date with the most recent events in the war in Ukraine or global geopolitics, subscribe to the Military Show for daily videos.